The rain in Seattle doesn't just fall, it swallows you. I stood on the curb outside the club, my breath hitching in the freezing air. My mascara was a smeared mess and my heart felt like it had been run through a paper shredder. 10 minutes ago, I'd watched my boyfriend of 3 years, the man I thought I'd marry, propose to a woman who wasn't me. "I'm sorry, Lena," Mark had whispered, his eyes darting away. "She's just more my speed. You're too quiet. Too much of a homebody." The words were still stinging, a fresh burn against my skin. I wiped my eyes, my fingers trembling as I fumbled with my phone. The screen was cracked, the light blindingly bright against the dark alley. I tapped the rideshare app, my vision blurry with tears. Black SUV. Plate ending in 4G9. A car pulled up, sleek and silent, the windows tinted so dark they looked like polished obsidian. I didn't wait. I didn't check the driver. I just wanted to disappear. I yanked the door open and slid into the leather seat, the scent of cedar and cold rain enveloping me. "Just drive," I choked out, leaning my head against the cool glass. "Please. Anywhere but here." The driver didn't say a word. The car pulled away from the curb with a predatory smoothness that should have been my first warning. I closed my eyes, letting the vibration of the engine lull me. I was so exhausted, so hollowed out by the betrayal, that I didn't notice we weren't heading toward my cramped apartment in the suburbs. We were heading up. I must have drifted off because the next thing I felt was a shift in pressure. The doors clicked open automatically. I blinked, my head throbbing. We weren't on a street. We were in a private underground garage, the air thick with the smell of expensive grease and something else. Something primal. "This isn't my house," I whispered, turning to the driver. The man in the front seat wasn't wearing a rideshare lanyard. He was massive, his neck thick as a tree trunk, and he was staring at me through the rearview mirror with eyes that seemed to glow a faint, terrifying amber. "The king is expecting you," he said. His voice sounded like grinding stones. "The who?" My heart hammered against my ribs. I reached for the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. "Let me out. I got in the wrong car." "I'm sorry, The back door on the opposite side opened. A man stood there. He was tall, impossibly tall, and dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my college tuition. His hair was dark, his jawline sharp enough to draw blood, and his presence, it was heavy. It felt like the air in the garage had suddenly vanished, leaving me gasping. He didn't look like a billionaire. He looked like a storm held inside a human skin. "Julius," the man said, his voice a low, vibrating velvet. "Why is there a human in my transport?" "She climbed in at the light, sire." I thought she was the delivery." The man stepped closer, leaning into the car. He caught my scent, his nostrils flaring. His eyes narrowed, and for a split second, they flashed a brilliant, predatory gold. A low growl, a sound no human throat should be able to make, vibrated in his chest. "She's not a delivery," he murmured, his gaze locking onto mine. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. Every instinct in my body told me I was sitting in the cage with a lion. He reached out, his hand large and warm, and tucked a stray hair behind my ear. His touch sent a jolt of electricity through me so violent I gasped. "You have very bad timing, Lena Hart," he said. "How do you know my name?" I breathed. He didn't answer. He simply reached in, unbuckled my seatbelt, and lifted me out of the car as if I weighed nothing. I struggled, hitting his chest, but it was like punching a wall of solid marble. "Put me down. I'll call the police." You'll stay quiet," he commanded. The word hit me with the force of a physical blow. My voice died in my throat. My limbs went heavy. It wasn't magic. It was authority. Absolute and terrifying. He carried me toward a private elevator. As the doors closed, I saw my reflection in the mirrored walls. A small, broken girl in the arms of a monster. "Who are you?" I managed to whisper. He looked down at me, his grip tightening just a fraction. "I am the man who is going to keep you alive. Whether you like it or not." Chapter 1. I woke up to the sound of camera shutters. It was a rapid-fire clicking like a swarm of metallic insects. I bolted upright, the silk sheets sliding down my shoulders. I was in a bed the size of a small zip code, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the foggy Seattle skyline. The memories hit me, the car. The man. The gold eyes. "Oh God," I whispered, clutching the duvet to my chest. "You're awake." I spun around. William Turner, I knew his face from the news, the reclusive tech king, was standing by a mahogany sideboard buttoning a crisp white shirt. He looked different in the daylight. More human, yet somehow more dangerous. "I need to leave," I said, my voice cracking. "I won't tell anyone about last night. I'll just go." "Look out the window, Lena." I hesitated, then crawled to the edge of the glass. Down on the street, dozens of photographers were swarming the entrance to the penthouse. Security guards were struggling to hold them back. "They saw Julius carry you in," William said, his voice flat. "And they saw you through the glass this morning before I could dim the tints. To the world, you are the mysterious woman who spent the night in the fortress of the most private man in America. Tell them the truth. Tell them I got in the wrong car." William walked over, his footsteps silent. He stopped inches from me. He was so much bigger than I realized. The heat coming off him was intense, like standing near a furnace. "The truth involves my driver being a werewolf who failed to check his perimeter," he said, leaning down so his face was level with mine. "The truth involves my rivals realizing I have a human vulnerability in my home. If you walk out that door as a nobody, you will be kidnapped, interrogated, and killed before you reach the corner. My world doesn't allow for accidents." Vulnerability. I swallowed hard. "I'm not a vulnerability. I'm a dental hygienist." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You are now my fiancé." "What?" "My PR team is already drafting the statement," he said, turning back to the mirror to fix his tie. "We've been dating in secret for 6 months. I proposed last night. That is the only story that keeps the paparazzi from digging into your past and my enemies from sniffing out your scent." "I won't do it. You can't make me." William turned, and for the first time I saw the alpha. His shoulders broadened, his eyes turned that terrifying amber, and a pressure filled the room that made it hard to breathe. "I am not asking, Lena. There is a war brewing in the north. The Vance pack is looking for any sign of weakness to challenge my claim. If I have a human fling, I am weak. I have a mate. I am protected by ancient law. But I'm not your mate," I argued, even as my heart did a strange little flutter at the word. He was across the room in a flash, his hand pinning the wall beside my head. He leaned in, his nose brushing against the pulse point on my neck. He took a deep, shuddering breath. "That's the problem, Lena," he growled, his voice vibrating against my skin. "My wolf thinks you are." He pulled back, his expression tortured. "The contract is on the table. Sign it or take your chances with the wolves at the gate." Literally. I looked at the gold fountain pen on the table, then at the man who looked like he wanted to protect me and devour me at the same time. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't stop shaking until the ink was dry. The engagement ring felt like a lead weight on my finger. It was a diamond the size of a postage stamp, cold and glittering, a perfect symbol of the cage I had just stepped into. "Keep your head down," William muttered as the elevator doors slid open. "Do not speak. Do not look at the lenses. Only look at me." His hand moved to the small of my back, and the heat of his palm burned through my thin blouse. As we stepped out into the lobby, a wall of white light hit us. The flashes were blinding, the shouting of the press a deafening roar. Lena, how did you meet? Is it true you're an heiress?" "William, look this way." William didn't flinch. He walked with a terrifying, predatory calm, his body shielding mine from the crush. For a second, a reporter lunged too close, his microphone nearly clipping my chin. I heard a sound then, not a shout but a low vibrating snarl that seemed to come from William's very bones. The reporter turned pale and scrambled back, tripping over his own feet. We were ushered into a waiting SUV. The moment the door slammed shut, the silence felt like a physical weight. "Where are we going?" I asked, rubbing my arms. I felt like I was vibrating. "To the council," William said. He was staring out the window, his jaw tight. "The engagement is public now, but according to pack law, it isn't bound, until the high alphas witness the intent. If we don't do this today, they can challenge the validity of our bond. And a challenge means a trial by combat. Combat? Over a fake engagement. William finally looked at me. His eyes were dark, the pupils blown wide. In my world, Lena, there is no fake. If I claim you, I am responsible for you. If I am found to be lying, my leadership is forfeit. They will tear me apart and then they will come for you. The council wasn't a boardroom. It was a sprawling estate hidden deep in the emerald forests outside the city. The house was made of heavy timber and stone, looking more like a fortress than a home. As we stepped out, I realized we weren't alone. Dozens of people, no wolves, were standing on the lawn. They didn't have cameras. They stood in eerie, perfect silence, watching us with unblinking eyes. The air here felt different. It was thick with the scent of pine, blood, and a strange electric tension that made the hair on my arms stand up. A woman stepped forward from the shadows of the porch. She was beautiful in a sharp, cold way, her hair white blonde and her eyes a piercing icy blue. She wore a dress that looked like it cost thousands, but she moved with the grace of a hunter. "William," she said, her voice like cracking ice. "You've brought a pet to the sacred grounds." "She is my fiancée, Nadia," William said, his voice dropping an octave. "Watch your tongue." Nadia's gaze flicked to me, and for a second, I felt a wave of pure, unadulterated hatred hit me. It was so physical I actually took a step back. "A human? You expect us to believe that the great Alpha King has chosen a fragile, scentless creature as his queen? Or is she just a shield to hide the fact that you've lost your edge?" "Try me, Nadia," William growled. He stepped in front of me, his presence expanding until he seemed to tower over the entire clearing. The pressure in the air increased. The alpha command I'd felt in the car. Several of the younger wolves in the crowd actually dropped to one knee, unable to withstand the weight of his authority. Nadia hissed, her fingernails lengthening into dark, sharp points, but she didn't move. "Inside," she spat. "The elders are waiting. Let's see if your little human survives the binding." William turned to me, his expression softening just a fraction. He reached out, his thumb tracing my jawline. "Stay close to me, Lena. No matter what you see or hear, do not let go of my hand." "William," I whispered, "what is the binding?" He didn't answer. He just gripped my hand, his fingers interlacing with mine so tightly it almost hurt, and led me into the mouth of the fortress. The great hall was lit by firelight. At the far end sat 3 elderly men, their faces carved with deep scars and ancient tattoos. The moment we stepped into the center of the room, the heavy oak doors behind us slammed shut. "William of the Turner line," the middle elder spoke. "You claim this human as your own?" "I do," William said, his voice echoing. "And you, human?" The elder looked at me, his eyes milky with age but sharp as a hawk's. "Do you accept the protection and the burden of the Alpha King? Do you swear to be bound by the laws of the moon and the pack?" William's grip tightened. I looked up at him. He looked like a god of war in the flickering orange light, but I saw the slight tremor in his hand. He was terrified for me. I accept," I said, my voice small but steady. "Then the blood must speak." Nadia stepped forward, a silver bowl in one hand and a jagged obsidian knife in the other. She smiled at me, a cruel, predatory baring of teeth. "The binding requires a drop of life from each," she murmured, standing before us, "to see if the souls recognize the union." She grabbed William's hand first, slicing a shallow line across his palm. He didn't even blink. Then she turned to me. Before I could pull away, she snatched my hand. Her grip was like iron. "Let's see what you're made of, little rabbit," she whispered. He pressed the blade into my palm. I gasped as the sharp sting radiated up my arm. My blood dripped into the bowl, mingling with William's thick, dark crimson. Suddenly, the fire in the hearth roared upward, turning a brilliant, haunting violet. The bowl in Nadia's hand began to vibrate, a low humming sound filling the room. The elders stood up in unison, their faces pale with shock. "The violet flame," the middle elder breathed. "It hasn't been seen in 100 years." William let out a choked sound, his eyes turning fully gold. He spun me around, his hands cupping my face. He looked at me as if he were seeing me for the very first time, not as a dental hygienist who got in the wrong car, but as something miraculous. The fated bond, he whispered, his voice trembling. It's real. Outside, a chorus of hundreds of wolves began to howl, a sound that shook the very foundations of the house. But the sound wasn't celebratory. It was a warning. The doors burst open. A man drenched in blood stumbled into the hall. "Sire," he gasped, collapsing to the floor. "The Vance pack. They've crossed the border. They're not waiting for a challenge. They're here for the girl." William's face transformed. The man I had signed a contract with was gone. In his place was a monster of pure fury. He pulled me against his chest, his arm wrapping around my waist like a steel band. "They want her," William roared, the sound shattering the windows of the hall. "Let them come. I will burn this forest to the ground before they touch a hair on her head." I looked at the blood on our joined palms, the violet light still dancing in his eyes, and realized with a sinking heart, the contract was gone. I wasn't his fake fiancé anymore. I was his prey, his prize, and his soul. And the war had just begun. Chapter 3. The world became a blur of silver and shadow. Before I could even process the scout's warning, William had me off my feet. He didn't carry me like a bride. He tucked me under his arm like a precious cargo and leaped. We cleared the stone staircase in a single bound as the first wave of attackers hit the house. The sound was unlike anything I'd ever heard. A symphony of shattering glass, splintering wood, and a deep, guttural snarling that made my very teeth ache. "William!" I shrieked, clutching the lapels of his suit. "Close your eyes, Lena," he barked. I didn't. I couldn't. I watched as he kicked a heavy oak table upright to create a barricade, his movements so fast they were almost impossible for my human eyes to track. 3 men, no 3 things, burst through the windows. They weren't fully wolves yet, but their skin was gray, their faces elongated, and their eyes were fixed on me with a hunger that made my stomach turn. William didn't hesitate. He let go of me for a split second to meet the first one head-on. With a roar that shook the floorboards, he caught the attacker by the throat. I heard a sickening crack, and the intruder was tossed aside like a rag doll. Blood sprayed across the white rug. I pressed my back against the cold stone of the fireplace, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would burst. This wasn't a movie. There were no stunt wires. There was just the smell of copper and the sight of the man I'd shared coffee with becoming a killing machine. "Nadia! Protect the queen," William commanded. Nadia appeared from the shadows, her eyes glowing with a cold, resentful light. She didn't move to help me. She stayed 5 feet away, her claws extended, watching me with more disgust than the monsters trying to kill me. "She's just a human, William," Nadia called out, even as she swiped at an attacker. "Is she worth the blood of our kin?" "She is the bond," William roared, his voice echoing with an authority that made the very air vibrate. "If she dies, our line ends. Move, or I'll rip your heart out myself." Nadia flinched and finally stepped in front of me, though she did it with a sneer. The battle moved into the courtyard. William was a whirlwind of violence, his suit jacket discarded, his white shirt stained crimson. He fought with a calculated brutality, defending the doorway with his body. But there were more of them, too many. A massive gray wolf, larger than a grizzly bear, lunged over the barricade. Its target wasn't William. It was me. "Lena." I saw the wolf's jaws open, saw the yellowed fangs and the hot breath misting in the cool air. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the end. Instead of teeth, I felt a massive weight slam into me, shielding me. I opened my eyes to see William, his shirt torn to shreds, his back bared to the wolf. The beast's claws tore through his flesh, leaving 4 deep, jagged trenches from his shoulder to his waist. William didn't scream. He just gritted his teeth, turned, and buried his hand in the wolf's chest, throwing it back into the darkness. "You're hurt," I whispered, reaching out to him. "William, you're back." He turned to me, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The golden light in his eyes was fading, replaced by a dark, simmering pain. He grabbed my shoulders, his fingers leaving bloody prints on my skin. "It's a scratch," he lied, though he was swaying on his feet. Julius is coming with the secondary transport. You're going to the safe house in the mountains. I'll stay and hold the line. No. I grabbed his hand, the one I had just signed a life-binding contract with. If you stay, they'll kill you. You're bleeding out. I am the Alpha King, he said, his voice dropping to a low, fierce whisper. I don't get to run. But you have to live. Do you understand? The violet flame. It means you're the only one who can lead if I fall. I don't want to lead. I want you to get in the car. For a second the billionaire mask slipped. He leaned down, forehead pressing against mine, his blood dripping onto the floor between us. 6 hours ago I was just a man who wanted to stay hidden. Now, I realize I'd die just to see you breathe one more time. That's the bond, Lena. It's not a contract. It's a curse. A horn blared from the driveway. Julius skidded the SUV into the courtyard, the wheels throwing up gravel. Go. William shoved me toward the door. William. He didn't look back. As I was pulled into the car by Julius, I saw William shift. It wasn't like the movies. It was a violent, bone-snapping transformation. Within seconds, a massive black wolf, eyes glowing like twin suns, stood where the man had been. He let out a howl that sounded like a war cry and a goodbye all at once. As we sped away into the trees, I looked through the rear window. The forest was crawling with gray shadows, and in the center of it all was the black wolf, standing alone against the dark. Is he going to die? I asked Julius, my voice trembling. Julius gripped the steering wheel so hard the leather groaned. He's fighting for his mate, Miss Hart. A wolf fighting for his mate doesn't die. He just becomes the devil. I looked down at my hand, the one with the ring and the dried blood. I realized then that the fake engagement had died in that hall. I wasn't just a dental hygienist anymore. I was the target of a war, and the only man who could save me was a monster who had just stolen my heart. Chapter 4. The safe house was a fortress of glass and cedar perched on the edge of a jagged cliff. The mountains were silent, buried under a thick blanket of snow that seemed to muffle the entire world. It should have been peaceful, but to me it felt like a tomb. I paced the length of the living room, my bare feet silent on the heated stone floors. I was wearing one of William's shirts, a crisp white button-down that reached my mid-thigh. It smelled like him, cedar, rain, and that underlying hint of something wild. It was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. 2 days. 2 days since the forest turned into a slaughterhouse. 2 days since I'd seen the black wolf disappear into a sea of gray. You need to eat, Miss Hart. Julius stood by the kitchen island, his massive arms crossed. He hadn't slept either. His amber eyes were fixed on the perimeter monitors. Any word? I asked, my voice a ghost of itself. Did the council send a message? Communication is down, Julius said grimly. The Vance pack jammed the satellite relays. We're dark until someone comes up that mountain road. I looked at the ring on my finger. The diamond seemed duller now, as if it were morning. He's dead, isn't he? That's why nobody is calling. He's gone, and I'm just waiting here for the next wolf to find me. William Turner is the most lethal predator on this continent, Julius said, though his voice lacked its usual certainty. He won't leave his mate behind. Stop calling me that, I snapped, tears finally pricking my eyes. I was a dental hygienist 4 days ago. I got in the wrong car. I'm not a mate. I'm a mistake. A low, heavy vibration shook the floorboards. It wasn't an earthquake. It was the sound of a heavy engine struggling up the icy incline. Julius moved with lightning speed, drawing a silver-plated handgun from a hidden holster under the counter. Get in the panic room, he commanded. Now, Lena. I didn't move toward the hidden door in the hallway. Instead, I ran to the window. A single black SUV skidded into the driveway, its headlights cutting through the swirling snow. The driver's side door creaked open and a figure stumbled out into the cold. My heart stopped. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was shirtless, his skin pale and slick with blood. He was leaning heavily against the car, his head hanging low. Even from the window I could see the jagged red furrows on his back, the wounds that hadn't healed. William! I screamed. I didn't wait for Julius. I threw open the heavy front door, the sub-zero air hitting me like a physical wall. I ran across the deck and into the snow, my feet freezing instantly, but I didn't care. I reached him just as his knees buckled. I caught him, my small frame groaning under his immense weight. He smelled of iron and wet fur. "Lena," he rasped. His eyes were barely open, the gold flecks in them dimming. "I'm here. I've got you," I sobbed, pulling his arm over my shoulder. Julius appeared on his other side, lifting him easily, and together we hauled him inside. We laid him on the stone floor in front of the fireplace. Up close he looked like he'd been through a wood chipper. He had bite marks on his shoulders and deep gashes on his chest. But it was his back, the silver-laced wounds from the Vance Alpha, that looked the worst. They were turning a sickly black. "Silver," Julius hissed, his face pale. "They used silver-tipped claws. He can't heal this on his own." "What do I do?" I asked, grabbing a medical kit from the cabinet. "Tell me what to do." "You can't do anything, human," a cold voice echoed from the doorway. I spun around. Nadia stood there, her clothes torn and splattered with mud. She looked exhausted, but her eyes were still full of venom. She held a small leather pouch in her hand. "The elders sent me with the mountain ash salve," she said, stepping toward William. "It's the only thing that pulls the silver out." "Move aside." "No," William growled. It was a weak sound, a pathetic imitation of his usual roar, but it was there. He reached out a shaking hand and grabbed my wrist. "Not her. You." Nadia froze, her face contorting with rage. "William, you're dying. The human doesn't know our ways. She'll kill you." "She is the bond," William wheezed, his eyes locking onto mine. "Her touch. It's the only thing the wolf will accept." Nadia dropped the pouch on the floor, her icy blue eyes boring into mine. "Fine. If he dies, his blood is on your hands, Lena Hart. And believe me, the pack will hunt you for it." She turned and vanished into the guest wing, leaving us in the flickering light of the fire. I opened the pouch. Inside was a thick, pungent black paste. I looked at William. He was shivering now, a cold sweat breaking out across his brow. "I don't know how to do this," I whispered. "Just touch me," he breathed. "The violet flame, use it." I dipped my fingers into the salve. My hands were shaking so hard I thought I'd drop it, but the moment I touched his skin, something happened. A warmth started in the center of my chest. It spread down my arms, a tingling electric heat that turned my vision a soft, hazy purple. My fingertips began to glow with a faint violet light. As I spread the salve over the black wounds, the skin began to hiss. William groaned, his back arching, his fingers digging into the stone floor. I'm so sorry," I cried, but I didn't stop. As the violet light from my hands touched the silver-poisoned flesh, the blackness began to recede. The skin started to knit together right before my eyes. It was impossible. It was magic. William's breathing steadied. The shivering stopped. He turned his head, looking up at me with eyes that were starting to glow a vibrant, healthy gold. "You did it," he whispered. The adrenaline that had been keeping me upright suddenly vanished. I slumped back against the sofa, my breath coming in ragged gasps. "I think I'm going to throw up." William let out a weak, raspy laugh. He reached up, his hand cupping my cheek. His palm was warm again. The predator was back. "Lena," he said, his voice dropping to that low, vibrating velvet. "The contract, the engagement, it was a lie to save my pack." "I know," I said, looking away. "But the wolf doesn't lie," he murmured, pulling me down until my face was inches from his. "I didn't announce our engagement to protect the pack. I did it because from the moment you sat in my car, I knew I would never let you leave it. William, I've spent 10 years building a world where I didn't need anyone," he said, his thumb tracing my lower lip. "Then you stumbled in with your smeared mascara and your broken heart and you ruined everything. I'm feral for you, Lena. And God help me, I don't think I want the cure." Before I could answer, he pulled me down and kissed me. It wasn't a billionaire's kiss. It was a claim. It tasted of iron, salt, and a future I was no longer sure I wanted to escape. But outside, in the howling wind, a new sound began. It wasn't the Vance wolves. It was something heavier. Something mechanical. "Julius." William barked, pulling away, his eyes snapping to the door. The front wall of the safe house exploded. Chapter 5. The explosion threw me backward. My ears rang with a high-pitched whine that drowned out the world, and for a few terrifying seconds, all I could see was white dust and falling snow. The front of the safe house was gone. The jagged hole in the wall looked out onto the cliffside, where a black tactical helicopter hovered like a giant angry hornet. Armed men in gray gear were rappelling down, their boots crunching on the broken glass. "Lena, get down." William was on his feet. He shouldn't have been able to stand, but the violet light had done more than just heal him. It had ignited him. He looked like a demon, his muscles corded and pulsing, the golden glow in his eyes so bright it was blinding. "The Vance Alpha is a coward," William roared, his voice cutting through the mechanical thrum of the rotors. "Sending humans to do a wolf's job?" The leader of the tactical team landed in the living room, unhooking his harness. He didn't raise a gun. He raised a heavy, silver-plated canister. "The board of directors sends their regards, Mr. Turner," the man said through a gas mask. "They've decided your secret life is a liability to the company's stock price. They want the girl. Dead or alive, it doesn't matter to them as long as the scandal ends." "The company?" I gasped, shielding my face from the wind. "This is about business?" "It's always about power, Lena," William hissed, stepping in front of me. "They think if they take my mate, they take my soul. They think they can control the king if they hold his heart." The canister hissed, releasing a thick emerald-green gas. "Wolfsbane," Julius shouted, covering his nose. "William, move." William lunged, but the gas hit him like a physical wall. He stumbled, his knees hitting the glass-strewn floor. The emerald vapor was a neurotoxin for his kind, a poison that turned his strength into lead. He gasped for air, his claws scraping uselessly against the stone. "No!" I screamed. I ran to him, but a gloved hand caught my hair, yanking me back. "Come on, sweetheart," the team leader said, dragging me toward the hole in the wall. "Time for a press conference you won't walk away from." I fought. I bit, I kicked, and I clawed. I looked back at William. He was watching me, his eyes wide and full of an agony that had nothing to do with the poison. He was reaching for me, his fingers inches from my ankle, his body trembling with the effort to fight the gas. "Lena," he wheezed. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't fear. It wasn't the homebody Mark had mocked. It was a cold, white-hot fury. I stopped struggling. I went limp in the man's grip, and when he hesitated, I grabbed the tactical knife from his own vest. I didn't think. I just drove the blade into his thigh. The man howled, releasing me. I didn't run for the door. I ran to the silver canister. "Julius, the fire extinguisher!" I yelled. Julius, struggling against the gas, understood instantly. He grabbed the heavy red tank from the kitchen wall and hurled it at me. I caught it, pointed the nozzle at the green vapor, and squeezed. The white foam suppressed the gas, creating a localized pocket of clean air around William. I dropped to my knees beside him, grabbing his face. "Breathe, William. Breathe for me." He took a jagged, deep breath. The gold returned to his eyes, fiercer than before. He looked at the men in the room, then at the helicopter outside. "My turn," he growled. He didn't shift into a wolf this time. He stayed human, but he moved with a speed that defied physics. He was a blur of charcoal and crimson. One man was thrown through the hole in the wall, disappearing into the abyss below. Another was slammed into the stone fireplace with enough force to crack the mantle. But the helicopter pilot saw the failure. He pivoted the bird, the heavy machine guns on the side swiveling toward us. "Get down." William tackled me, shielding my body with his as the room erupted in a hail of bullets. Wood splintered. Glass turned to dust. I tucked my head into the crook of his neck, the smell of him, the cedar and the wildness, the only thing I knew. "We're trapped," I cried over the roar. "William, we can't stay here." "I know," he said. He looked at me, and for a second the violence disappeared. He looked at me with a terrifying, beautiful clarity. "Do you trust me, Lena? In the wrong Uber and everything?" I managed a tearful laugh. "Always." He stood up, scooped me into his arms, and ran. He didn't run for the back of the house. He ran straight for the hole in the wall. Straight for the cliff. William, wait. Hold your breath. We leaped. For a second, there was only the wind and the terrifying weightlessness of the fall. I screamed, clutching him as the dark forest rushed up to meet us. We hit the deep snow on the lower ledge with a bone-jarring impact. William took the brunt of it, his body acting as a cushion. We tumbled down the embankment, snow filling my mouth and eyes, until we slammed into the trunk of a massive ancient pine. Silence. I blinked, coughing up snow. I was sore, every muscle screaming, but I was alive. I looked at William. He was pinned against the tree, his eyes closed. William. I crawled over to him, my hands trembling. William, wake up. Please. His eyes flickered open. He looked at the sky where the helicopter was circling back, its searchlight cutting through the trees like a hungry eye. They won't stop, he whispered. The board. The Vance pack. They've joined forces. They've realized that as long as you're with me, I'm a king they can't control. Then let's go, I said, grabbing his hand. Let's run. No, William said, his grip on my hand tightening. He looked at the forest where dozens of pairs of glowing eyes were emerging from the shadows. The Vance pack had arrived to finish what the mercenaries started. We don't run anymore. He stood up, pulling me behind him. He looked at the circle of wolves, then up at the hovering helicopter. He let out a laugh, a dark, jagged sound that sent chills down my spine. They want a scandal? William shouted to the sky. They want to see the Alpha King go feral? Then let's give them a show. He turned to me, his face illuminated by the searchlight. Lena, the contract had a clause I never told you about. If the Alpha King falls, his mate inherits the pack. All of it. The company, the land, the lives. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm not going to fall, he said, leaning in to kiss my forehead. But I'm going to make sure they never forget who you are. He stepped forward into the clearing, his body beginning to smoke with the heat of his transformation. But this time it was different. The violet light was swirling around him, mixing with the black fur. He wasn't just an alpha anymore. He was something ancient. And then from the trees behind us, more wolves emerged. Not gray. Not hostile. The Turner pack, Julius said, stepping out from the brush, his clothes tattered but his gaze steady. We don't leave our king. And we definitely don't leave our queen. The battle for North America began in that snowy clearing, and for the first time I didn't feel like a dental hygienist. I felt like the spark that was going to set this entire world on fire. Chapter 6. The forest was no longer a place of shadows. It was a cathedral of violence. William's transformation was a roar made flesh. The black wolf that emerged was colossal, his fur shimmering with that haunting violet light I had sparked within him. He didn't wait for the Vance wolves to charge. He met them halfway, a blur of shadow and teeth. Beside me, Julius and the Turner pack were a wall of teeth and muscle. I stood in the center of the chaos, the snow under my feet turning a dark, slushy crimson. Above us, the helicopter tried to pivot, but the wind in the mountain pass was treacherous. The pilot! I screamed, pointing upward. He's trying to line up a shot. Julius let out a bark of command. Two of his swiftest warriors leaped onto the lower branches of the pines, using the trees as springboards. They didn't reach the chopper, but they didn't need to. Their weight and the sheer distraction caused the pilot to swerve, the machine gun fire spraying harmlessly into the dirt. In the clearing, William was a god of ruin. He had the Vance Alpha, a scarred, moth-eaten beast, pinned by the throat. The gray wolf thrashed, but William's grip was absolute. He wasn't just fighting for territory anymore. He was settling a debt for every tear I'd shed since I stepped into that car. With one final bone-shattering snap, the Vance Alpha went still. A silence fell over the forest, deeper than the snow. The remaining gray wolves whimpered, dropping their bellies to the ground in total submission. Their leader was dead. The war for the North was over. But the searchlight from the helicopter still burned down on us. William! I yelled. The black wolf turned. He looked at the mechanical beast in the sky, then at me. Through the bond I felt his thought, a jagged, fierce current of electricity. And it. He ran toward me, but he didn't stop. He lowered his shoulder and I realized what he wanted. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed his fur and swung myself onto his back, my fingers digging into the thick, warm muscle of his neck. He lunged toward the cliff's edge, gaining speed. At the very last second he leaped, not down but out. As we hit the apex of the jump, I felt the violet heat surge from my palms into his skin. The light exploded, blinding the pilot. The helicopter jerked, its tail rotor clipping a jagged rock on the cliff face. We slammed back onto the ledge just as the helicopter spiraled out of control, a fireball blooming against the mountainside. The explosion lit up the night like a second sun, casting long, dancing shadows across the snow. William shifted back before the echoes had even died away. He stood in the wreckage of the clearing, naked and bleeding, but his head was held high. He walked toward me, his gait steady, and stopped until our toes were touching. "Is it over?" I whispered, my voice trembling. He reached out, his hand cupping the back of my neck. His skin was scorching hot. "The war is over, Lena. But the rain is just beginning." 1 month later. The penthouse had been rebuilt, the glass now reinforced with a mesh that could stop a tank. But the atmosphere inside had changed. It was no longer a cold fortress of tech. It was a home. There were books on the shelves that weren't about coding. There was the smell of real coffee and the sound of the city humming below. I stood on the balcony looking out at the Seattle skyline. I was wearing a silk dress the color of the sunset, and the diamond on my finger caught the light. "The board of directors called," William said, stepping out behind me. He wrapped his arms around my waist, pulling me back against his chest. He was wearing a suit again, but he kept the top buttons open. He looked like a man who had finally learned how to breathe. "And?" I asked, leaning my head back. "They've dropped the morality suit," he murmured into my hair. "Apparently, the shareholders quite like the idea of a queen who can take down a tactical team with a fire extinguisher. The stock is at an all-time high." I laughed, turning in his arms. "I still can't believe I'm a dental hygienist who owns 40% of a tech empire." "You're not just a dental hygienist, Lena," William said, his expression turning serious. He picked up my hand, kissing the palm where the scar from the binding remained. "You're the alpha queen. My pack follows you because they love you. I follow you because my wolf would starve without your light." He looked at me, his eyes flashing that brilliant, faded gold. "The contract is officially null and void," he said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a piece of paper. He tore it into a dozen pieces and let the wind take them over the balcony rail. "There is no more engagement. No more faking." My heart skipped a beat. "Oh." William dropped to one knee. He didn't have a new ring, he just held my hand, his thumb stroking my pulse. "Lena Hart," he said, his voice a low, vibrating velvet that made my soul ache. "You got into the wrong car, but you found the right man. I'm a monster, a king, and a fool who fell in love with a girl who bit a mercenary. Will you stay? Not because of a contract and not because of a bond, but because you want me as much as I want you." I looked at the man who had burned his world down to keep me warm. I thought about the violet light and the black wolf and the way my heart beat in time with his. "On one condition," I said, a mischievous smile tugging at my lips. "Anything," he vowed. "You're never allowed to hire Julius to drive me anywhere ever again. I'm taking the wheel from now on." William laughed, a bright, genuine sound that echoed off the glass. He stood up and pulled me into a kiss that tasted like victory and 1,000 tomorrows. "Deal," he whispered against my lips. Below us, the city lights flickered like stars, but they were nothing compared to the violet flame burning between us. I had started the week looking for a ride home and I had ended it finding my kingdom. The Alpha King had claimed me, but in the end I was the one who had tamed the beast. What an ending. From a wrong turn in the rain to the violet throne. Lena and William's story proves that sometimes, the universe has a much wilder plan for your heart than you ever imagined. If you loved this journey from a fake contract to a faded feral bond, make sure to howl at that like button and subscribe to Tori's Wolf Fantasies. I'm curious, do you think the board of directors got what they deserved, or is there a bigger threat lurking in the shadows for our new queen? Drop your favorite moment in the comments below. I read every single one, and your theories might just inspire our next tale. Don't go wandering off just yet. Click the video on your screen right now to dive into another world of possessive alphas and the brave women who tame them. Until the next full moon, stay wild.